Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be doing a video about dynamic bones. I'll also probably say some stuff about colliders and how dynamic bones interact with colliders. This is going to be... I'll try and do like a shortened down version, or at least a cheat sheet, but I will fully do the explanations afterwards as well. So to have a quick, brief overview of dynamic bones. Damping is how airy it is, aka how much it does not bounce when it reverts back to its original position. Elasticity is how fast it snaps back into place. Stiffness is how stiff it is when it moves. And inertia is how difficult it is to move. Friction is how much it reacts and how smoothly it reacts to colliders. Radius is how big the orbs are. End length is to add more length to the dynamic bones even if the bones are not there. Gravity does not work in VRChat, so don't use it. Force is basically gravity. Always use the y-axis and make sure to do a negative number so it goes down. Colliders are the colliders on the model itself, which the dynamic bones will react to. Exclusions are bones under the hierarchy that you don't want it to give dynamic bones to. Freeze axis stops it going in a specific axis direction. Distant disable stops dynamic bones from being active at a certain distance. But VRChat does that anyway, so wouldn't recommend using it. The small graphs or the small boxes underneath, which have distribution after them, will allow you to give different values to your dynamic bones depending on where they are, allowing you to do different values for each bone without having to make a completely different dynamic bone setup. The root is the first bone that you want to be dynamic. Update rate shouldn't change from 60. You can animate dynamic bones being enabled and disabled with this check mark right here. So in the case you want to disable or hide an object with dynamic bones on it and you don't want it coming out of the body while it's supposed to be hidden, you can animate the dynamic bone turning off. And when you want it to reappear, you can animate it turning back on again. There are colliders in the body which can react to dynamic bones, but they are fairly easy to set up, so I don't think I need to put that in the video. Anyway, that was the basic overview. I'll probably actually put that first in the video now that I think about it. I did record it afterwards, but I don't care. So this is the setup that I have. Dynamic bones are basically bones that move. I know, right? It's so complicated. In Unity, if you move it side to side, normally the bones won't move, but that's why you go into play mode by clicking this button right here, which will show how your model will function in VRChat. So I'm in play mode now, so if I move it side to side, you see that they move. This is how my model moves in VRChat. I do have bones active that shouldn't be right now, but I have those deactivated in the FX. It's just the FX isn't on the model at the moment, but it's fine. Okay, so actually, for now, just a quick tip. I usually tinker around with my dynamic bones in play mode so I can see how they're working properly in accordance to the model. But when you leave play mode, everything you've done will be reverted back to where it was before you hit play mode. So if you do want to tinker around with it in play mode, make sure you copy before you exit play mode so then you can paste it when you get out of play mode. So I'm gonna just hide this model because that's my actual working one. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of all the dynamic bones. And if you wanted to know how I selected multiple at once, basically you click the first one, hold shift, click the last one, and it selects all of them. And if you want to deselect some of them in between, like say I don't want to have all these head joints, then you click control and you just click them individually. Easy selection tips. This is also helpful for when you want to do like a skirt or something and you don't want to individually copy and paste the dynamic bones from each joint. You can just do it all in one go. So we are going to start off with the back here. So see, I've just selected these, add component, and then you should already have dynamic bones installed in your Unity. Also, quick tip, if you don't want things to deselect when you click something else, right here you can click these 3 dots right here and you can click lock. So if I click any one of these other bones, it's not switching this menu, this is still selecting these bones that I chose earlier. So actually, one thing that you should do first, before you do that, when you have all of these with the dynamic bones set up, quickly drag each of the names. You will have to do this individually. Dragging them as a whole will not work. So, but then after that you can go ahead and lock it again. So everything you do in this will happen to all 4 of these bones at the same time. Easier to work with, really. So I'm going to go into play mode so I can show you guys what everything does. So the first thing you'll notice is you can't actually see any of those orbs that were there before. That is because right over here the radius is set to 0. The radius, if you guys don't know maths terminology, which I know not everyone does, radius is just a fancy name to say how big the orb is. So set it to 0.2, that's rather big. I would suggest keeping to 0 points to begin with. So 0.1, 0.2. I'm gonna put it to 0.2 because that seems pretty nice. I thought this was the back hair. It's not, it's the front hair, it's the fringe, it's fine though. It's whatever. I guess Pella was... okay, listen, I don't work on this. This is a new base for me, okay? This is a new hairstyle. I'm still getting used to the names. But anyway, we're gonna start off at the top. Always keep the update rate to 60 because that's 60 frames per second. Don't worry about it. But yes, if you want to turn off dynamic bones, but you want to still have them on the model, such as if you want to do an animation to enable or disable something which has dynamic bones, but you don't want it doing that weird stuff that you saw before on my model. If you just select all of them, obviously this is my skirt, I don't have it right on the top because it was clipping a lot when I did, but in the animation you can have an animation set up to turn off the dynamic bones via this check mark right here. So they're still there, so I could have an animation to turn them back on. Well, I guess I missed 2, it's fine. But see there how that kind of goes nuts? That's because these 2 are still active. So I've just copied the values that I have for my setup for the hair, just because it's a nice place to start off so you can actually see the difference between everything. So we're going to start off with damping, okay? So let me first of all show you what it looks like when it moves. There you go. That's how it's moving right now. Very nice, very chilled out, you know, not too bad. So I currently have it set to 0.34. If I turn it all the way down, you see it's very bouncy. It bounces a lot. Then if I turn it all the way up, it just kind of flows. There's no bounce to it whatsoever. So I have mine set to 0.34, so there is still a little bit of a bounce, a little bit of a wave when it comes back down. The higher up I put it, the less it's going to do that bounce, and the more wavy and kind of airy it's going to look. So I guess damping is how not bouncy it is, or how airy it is, to put it into simple terms. Put it back to 1.34, this is how it moves. Now we're going to go into elasticity. Now I'm sure you guys know about rubber bands and elastic. It's basically how quick it is to snap back into place. So if I have that set to 0, it will never snap back into place by itself. It will just kind of stay. Whereas if I set it to 1, it will always stay in place no matter how much you move it. If I move it down to 0.75, oh god, it's still too high. Yep, it's very difficult to move because of how quick it snaps back into place. So I usually have mine set rather low if it's something flowy like hair. But this elasticity usually works very much with stiffness and inertia or inert. I have mine set pretty low because stiffness and inertia or inert are pretty high. Well, I mean, at least the inertia is. So I usually don't need elasticity to be too high. But obviously, this is something for you to experiment with. Anyway, speaking of stiffness, kind of self-explanatory. If I turn it all the way up, it's stiff, it's not going to move. And if I turn it all the way down, then it's literally going to move no matter what you do. Like, you could just kind of just edge and it's moving. So I have mine pretty low because I don't want it to be moving every time I breathe. If you look at the graphs underneath, you could have it set up that you have like 3 different setups of dynamic bones, but that's really unoptimized. So I would highly recommend using these graphs. So damping distribution, it just means it's going to change the level depending on how far up or down the dynamic bone is. So I have inertia distribution on my model right now, but let's do stiffness distribution. So say I wanted it to be the same level at all times, this would be the one I'd pick. Or if I want it to be less stiff at the beginning but more stiff the further down you go, I could do a graph that says as such. So as you can see, these two are moving very freely, but these two are kind of sticking together pretty rough, you know? They're not like bending at all because they're rather stiff. Inertia. Inertia is how difficult something is to move. So something with a large inertia means it's very difficult to move it. This is again similar to stiffness, and elasticity, just kind of a different meaning, I guess. Because if something's too stiff, it's not going to move. If something has too much elasticity, it's not going to move. But this is actually how difficult it is to move it. So if I had 0 inertia on it, it's going to be very easy to move. But if I had it all the way up, it's not going to move. Or it's going to move very slowly, like a very small amount. Now the reason it is still going, is because on mine I have it that it starts off with more inertia than it ends with. So if I just pull that down, and I pull, then in theory when I do this, yep, it's not gonna move. At all. Now you're probably wondering what friction is, if you're not a sciencey person. Friction is again similar to inert, stiffness, elasticity. It works a lot with them. To be honest, the only one that doesn't really work with the others is just damping. It's just how bouncy it is, to be honest. Damping's kind of just its own thing. Keep in mind, all of this stuff that I'm saying in this video is purely relating to my experience with Unity, because I've been making my own models for a while now. Friction is again similar to inert, stiffness, elasticity. It works a lot with them. So when it collides with a collider, I think it's just how much it kind of reacts to it. Because when I'm pulling that through my head, which has colliders, when the friction is up, it's kind of slowing down when it's on its way back to its original position. I said radius. Oh, with the radius as well, with the graphs, you can actually change the size depending on how far down it is. So mine actually start off smaller than they end. So if I pull that up, you can see that the top ones get bigger. And then if I pull this side down, they get smaller. And if you double click in between, you can make like whatever you want. And these here change how big of an angle it is. Now, end length, that is for making the dynamic bones go further down than they do. So if you see here, the final dynamic bone is right here, but then the tip of the hair is here. I used to have a problem with one of my models where the dynamic bones would stop here, but then the end of the hair was down here, so I would have to use end length to kind of get down there. This is mostly just for if you want to have them collide with things in game. So the end length, I don't know, let's go with 1. Also, one thing for VRChat, never use gravity, ever. It doesn't work. I've tried. If you want your hair to come down and stay down, I would recommend using force instead. So force Y, I have mine very low because it goes a long way. One thing, always remember to do minuses. So 0.01, it's very, very heavy, so it's going to always be pushing down. Just a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. There we go. So that's usually what level I have mine at. So if I ever want to just, I don't know, rotate my model. Obviously on my model it's going to go by Y is this way. But as you can see, even though I'm like moving the force back and forth like this, it's still always going to go down to Y. Whereas if I did this, does the same. Chest. Huh. Actually, maybe I have my level 2 do. Let's have it down like that. There we go. Don't worry about the chest being like that. It's because I don't have it set to the pivot. There we go. Now it's moving like a normal person. Kind of. But yeah, you might want to experiment with this because you don't want it to be too heavy where it's constantly clipping through your face, but you also don't want it to be too light that it doesn't actually go down at all. Again, a lot of this is going to be trial and error. But when you are planning on leaving play mode, before you do that, go over to here, the 3 dots, and if you do copy component, when you get out of play mode, if everything reverts back to normal, like say they used to be like that, and I went into play mode and I messed around with it and it was like, oh no, I've just lost it, but I haven't, because paste component values will put them back. Now, moving down to colliders. So as I said before, you can move your model using colliders. So as you can see on mine, they are the yellow orbs in my arms. I do have them in my legs and in my torso as well as in my head because I like my stuff to collide with everything that I am. Because immersion. They do make your model less optimized, but to be honest, I don't really care. People have way less optimized models than I do, so, you know, just try and optimize it as much as you can, but if it's gonna mess with how your immersion is, I wouldn't recommend it. Or at least try to find, like, a workaround. You know, just mess with it, try and make it as optimized as possible without lessening your own experience. But if I were to move this in play mode and I would move it through my hair, then it would collide with the hair and it would move with it. But that is only if it is set up to do so. So if I had my collider set to 0, even if I moved this arm with colliders inside it through this hair, it would not move. This hair would not care about these colliders. So here, you have to put in how many there are. For some reason it always makes you do one. Oh, it has 0 as 1, so you always have to like type in one more than the number that's going to show up here. But these are all the colliders that my hair will collide with. So the head collider, the neck collider, the left wrist, the elbow and the arm, because the shoulder is there anyway, like I have it from the elbow to the shoulder, so I don't really care about that little area, but no one really cares. Then the chest collider, the spine collider, the chest takes this area, the spine takes this area, right arm, elbow, wrist, same as before, and I also have a collider in the floor. This is so that whenever I'm sitting down, or lying down, because I do roleplay, whenever my hair collides with the ground beneath me, it won't just go through the floor, it will actually react to the ground. So yes, I do have a massive collider underneath me, but it's just my floor. It's fine, it's just one. But yeah. And if you have bones underneath that you don't want it to react to, such as if you had a skirt with, say, I don't know, imagine that this sword right here was connected to the skirt, but I don't want it to move around in the flowy fashion that the skirt does. I want it to just be stiff right there. Well, I would go to whichever bone hierarchy it is connected to. So let's, you know what? Let's actually throw the sword in here. I don't know which bone this is. It's that one. Oh well, that doesn't make sense, but that's fine. So the sword is in here, so you can see it is connected to these, and whenever this moves, so will this. That's not what I want. So what you can do is go down to exclusions, type 1 exclusion, and then drag sword down here. So it's going to pretend that this sword doesn't exist, and it's not going to give dynamic bones to this sword. Anyway, moving down to freeze axes. This is for if you don't want it to move in a specific axis. Unfortunately, you can only do this with one axis, so I can only choose the X, Y, or Z. Going back to the hair. I'm gonna freeze axis X. We're gonna move it like this. So you can see how the rest of the hair is moving side to side. But this is kind of like hesitating a bit. Let's do axis Y. Yeah. So the way that it is, it's going to forever stay at that height. So it's not going to go up nor down. It will always be at that height. We can go left and right. It can go, it can go back and forth, but it cannot go up or down because it is frozen in the y-axis. What about the x-axis? Yep, it's moving side to side. It's moving up or down, but it will not go back and forth. So if you have an item that you don't want going in all directions and you want to freeze it in a specific direction, that is how you do it. Distant disable. I don't actually think I've ever messed with that before, so I believe okay. This is for optimization purposes. So if you're far away enough from the model, the dynamic bones will stop. But to be honest, VRChat kind of does that anyway. So I would only recommend doing that if you actually do want it to stop moving closer than VRChat automatically does it. Oh, you could actually do it based on an object. So if you wanted to stop your dynamic bones by placing down an object, you could probably do it with that. And how close you want it. Obviously it's set to 10, but I'm not using it, so it's fine. That's it. Stay sharp, size your problems, and I will see you in the next video. Or if you head over to my Twitch in the next stream. From the Silent Swordswoman. Bye bye!